I've actually worked as a practitioner, as a chief economist of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And basically, one of the things which differentiate that bank from other development banks is what we sometimes call the end of development economics. So there is a research paper, which was just disseminated a couple of weeks ago, written by established and famous development economist of Indian origin, Ravi Kanpur, which says development economics used to be a special discipline, and now it's merged into mainstream economics. And development banking and development aid was also something very, very special in 50s, 60s, and 70s, when we thought governments have to come up with enormous amounts of money to help people on the ground, to lift them out of poverty, to help countries, low-income and middle-income countries, to develop. Now, suddenly, in 80s and 90s, we saw that government resources are actually dwarfed by private sector resources. And moreover, we saw that if you want to lift people out of poverty, you need to give them an opportunity to innovate, to produce, to create new opportunities for themselves, their families, and their communities. And I'm very happy that here in the business school, we actually work on this, not just as academic doing research on this, not just as professors teaching new generations of students. And here in the front row, we have the panelists, and some of them have actually studied here. But also the idea of Wheeler Institute is also to have a real impact on the ground. And I would like to thank Rajesh for this initiative. I also had a privilege and honor to meet the donors, the founding donors of the Institute, Maureen and Tony Wheeler, who love this initiative. We talked about this initiative in detail, and they're very happy that the Institute is doing this work in India. The other academic director, Elias Papayano, is not here with us. I would like to congratulate him for supporting this initiative. But as I said, for us, for London Business School, it's something we're very proud of. When people are asking us, in your purpose, in your mission statement, you're saying that you want to make an impact how business impacts the world, we are usually asked, can you give us examples how you actually deliver on this? And of course, the partnership between Wheeler Institute and DL Labs is the best example. And I'm very proud of this. I would like to thank Rajesh for putting together this initiative. Gaurav, thank you so much. And without further ado, we have the last members of audience coming in. Without further ado, I would like to give the microphone to Rajesh so he can chair the first panel. Thank you so much again, and I'm looking forward to learning more about what Wheeler Institute and DL Labs have done together.
You phrased the evolving role of development economics, Sergei, and because you said merging economics and development, which is exactly what we're doing here. It's the Wheeler Institute of Business and Development. We're merging the two. And I have to say, I'm so very proud of the work that so many in this room and beyond at LBS and in our extended community are doing. But today is about a very special topic and a very special group. Let me first start by doing a quick round of introductions here. Immediately to me, next to me, is Rohini Patil. I have to say, it is such a particular delight. Muthu, it's absolutely wonderful. I'll explain why to have you here. And Luke, thank you so much for being here. But Rohini has come. You have no idea the number of trips he had to take to get a visa to come from her village in the hinterlands of India all the way to London on her first international trip. And Rohini, some of you, especially the folks who are on Zoom, may recognize has appeared on some of our other Voice of the Village panels. And this is a super cool initiative that Guriev helped cook up. The idea is too often we see panels where we have business luminaries, government luminaries, talking about some unknown abstract entity or individuals somewhere out there who's engaged in the activities or outcomes that the panelists are talking about. The joy of the Voice of the Village panel is that we're all here, and the people actually doing the work on the ground are here, and Rohini represents that, and you'll hear her story. So welcome, namaste, or what's welcome in Hindi? Okay, now my Hindi is terrible, and we had all kinds of fancy IT for this panel. At the last minute, we've had some IT problems. So we have our amazing, technologically superior, advanced human intervention in the form of Mithilesh, who's hiding out back there. Mithilesh will do his best to translate what Rohini says to English, and I'll do my best in my broken Hindi to translate to make sure Rohini follows our conversation. Muthu. Muthu is the CEO, as you can see up there, and director of EID Parry. EID Parry. Those of us who grew up in India remember EID Parry from many, many contexts, but is one of the oldest companies in India. I think it goes back to 1600s.
It's 236 years old.
Okay, so maybe not 1600s, but nevertheless, 1700s then? Or,
You're taking on the task of doing the math.
And Muthu runs this organization now. It's part of a family conglomerate that Muthu is part of as well. I remember Muthu from his time. Not in this building, because this building didn't exist when you were here as an MBA student.
It's quite nice, but yeah, we didn't have this building in 2015.
The other building exists as well. You'll be happy to know, which is where Muthu got his MBA from London Business School, graduating in 2015. He'll tell us a bit about his journey in a bit. And then I'm absolutely delighted, Luke, to welcome you. And Luke is UK CEO for SumUp. So if you paid a taxi driver, purchased flowers, interacted with a small business owner with your phone or card, odds are very high you've benefited from the work that Luke and his colleagues do at SumUp, which is a Berlin-based company. Luke runs the UK operations. I also particularly appreciate your presence here because you were called in at the very last minute, Luke, and so thank you so much for
very happy to be here. Thank you.
So the theme today is the power of business. And I have a slide with a question for you, and we only have one slide. Yeah. So, welcome to London Business School. We do regular quizzes, as you know. This is part of the exam time, if you will. Except there's no wrong answer necessarily in here. So those who are on Zoom, just imagine the answer and write it to yourself to this question. Those who are here, I'll request a show of hands to the following answer, to potential responses. What is the foremost way in which businesses do good? Now, of course, there are many ways in which businesses could do good or bad, for that matter. But let's focus on the good and, in your mind, the number one way in which businesses do good. Is it by engaging in CSR, corporate social responsibility? I see some heads nodding sometimes. Or number two, by paying taxes in the appropriate jurisdictions. Number three, by creating employment and jobs. And I'll ask for your response in a second. 4, by selling needed products and services. And 5, by creating wealth for shareholders who they can then create foundations and charitable organizations or some other way of giving away to worthy causes. How many here would say the number one way in which businesses do good is by engaging in corporate social responsibility? Okay, we have 2 out of a group of about 40, 50. How many would say by paying the taxes that are owed? Okay, we have a few more, about twice as many, about 4 responses. How many would say by creating employment? Okay, I see about half of the group. How many would say by selling needed products and services? Okay, about 30% or so of the group. By creating wealth for shareholders. Okay, some of you, you could vote twice, it appears, but okay, fair enough. But I see that there are many ways in which to do it, but I sense a slightly lower response. So it seems, by the way, I've asked this question in our MBA classes with CEOs, in a survey we did in 2019 across lots and lots of companies in Africa, and the answer is always the same. By creating employment and by selling needed products and services. These, especially employment, especially when you talk about emerging markets. That's my sort of intro to both the work that Dharma Life does, and Guriev, the CEO and founder, is here. You'll hear more about that, what he does a little later. But also the logic behind the DL Labs initiative from Dharma Life and London Business School and Accenture and Siriti and several others. What I'd like to do in this panel is to delve into the ways in which each of the businesses represented here do good. And then some of the challenges they face, and as individuals, as leaders, as entrepreneurs, how they have sought to overcome those challenges. That's sort of the agenda, and then we'll go to question and answer. It's a fairly interactive conversation. Yeah? So I'm going to start with Muthu. Yeah? Muthu, if you had to think of the number one way or foremost way in which businesses do good, what would that be? And especially from your experience, tell us a bit about Parry and then your perspective on this.
Sure. So thanks, Professor Chandy. It's lovely to be back on campus. I think from my perspective, it's products and services. It's very central to how businesses can do good. From the point of view of Parry, really we were in the commodity business of making sugar, a large player in India, and I think we faced a lot of headwinds. And we'll cover a little bit of that later on, but we faced a lot of headwinds around regulation and climate change. And both of these were sort of in the realm of the uncontrollable, or sort of limited span of control. So as we reimagined the business, we took on 2 opportunities, again linked to the core business. I think that's how we took on these opportunities. One was of biofuel. We saw a clear tailwind there. There was mandates around blending of biofuel with gasoline, and we hope that will expand into a role in sustainable aviation fuel, so on and so forth. So I think there we are not only seeing a good business model or an opportunity to build out a good business model, I think we're also seeing impact that we are making on the environment, on climate change, on India and the world at large, sustainability goals.
Especially since India, at least historically, has imported much of its...
Absolutely. So India is a net importer of energy. So this also brings the forex bill down. I think to date, India has saved about $10 to $12 billion by adopting the biofuels program. And I think this obviously would ensure that India then reinvests, or at least that money saved in other gainful areas.
And it's interesting that you say products and services, Muthu, and that makes a lot of sense. But particularly striking given you and all companies beyond a certain size in India are required to do 2% of your, maybe you could tell us about the CSR rules and how you deal with that in India, because you're required as part of the legal infrastructure in India to do CSR, which was the response number 1.
Yeah. So, and I think that's mandated, and I think we do that. We largely do that through a charitable foundation which encompasses the entire group. And I think that's doing some very good work on education, healthcare, sport, as well as water conservation. But that apart, I think it's interesting with the growth in biofuel, and the other avenue we've taken on is food. very central to that is the farm and the farmer. And I think the CSR work that we're doing is nicely sort of synergizes with the two avenues of business, and especially the farm and improving agricultural outcomes.
So farm and the farmer reminds me of, that's an excellent segue to two things. One, our next panelist, Rohini, but also the fact that we have Meera Shah here, who will be on the next panel. So can I urge you, stick around please for the second panel, where we have another all-star cast on a really important topic. And Meera is the head of smallholder farmer initiatives at Shell Foundation. And so I can see the link and all of these, back to Sergei's point, interact. Back to Rohini, ये हम पूछ रहे थे, I'm going to translate the question. हम पूछ रहे थे कि जब business अच्छा करता है society के लिए, ऐसा सबसे ज़्यादा किससे करते हैं? वो जो हमने आपको दिखाया था ना कि जो choices थे, आपका क्या इरादा है? और ज़रा इंट्रोडक्शन भी बताइएगा, आप क्या करते हैं और कैसे करते हैं?
हाँ, नमस्ते, मैं रोहिणी हूँ और मैं 2016 से धर्मा लाइफ से जुड़ी हूँ और मेरा एक हनी बी का छोटा सा बिजनेस है। मैं तो एक कर रही हूँ कि जो क्वेश्चन पूछा था
एक मिनट, ज़रा वो ट्रांसलेट करने देखेंगे।
Just I'm checking the mic. Hello.
Yeah.
Is it working? Yeah. Sorry. रोहिणी ते परत रिपीट करताल का तुम्ही काय म्हणताय?
हाँ, मैं 2016 से धर्मा लाइफ से जुड़ी हूँ। उससे पहले मैं मतलब हनी बी का बिजनेस करती थी।
So she's saying that she joined Dharma Life in 2016 and she used to do honey making and selling that honey product as her business.
और जो आपने क्वेश्चन पूछा था उसमें से मैं फोर्थ का मतलब सेल्स एंड प्रोडक्ट्स का जो है वो चूज करती हूँ। सब टॉपिक अच्छे ही है, मतलब वो इम्पोर्टेंट ही है बिजनेस में हमारे समाज के लिए और सबके लिए, लेकिन मैं प्रोडक्ट के बारे में बताना चाहती हूँ कि अगर हम गुड प्रोडक्ट बनाते हैं और लोगों को देते हैं तो उनकी सेवा भी होती है और उसमें से जॉब भी दे सकते हैं लोगों को, क्योंकि प्रोडक्ट बनाना है तो जॉब मतलब सेल्स सर्विस सब कुछ आता है उसमें।
Okay, so referring to the question Professor Rajesh asked earlier, so she thinks selling products and services is one of the important channels where business could do good, and she thinks because products solves problems of consumers, so that's an important channel. At the same time, she thinks that the employment channel is also important because when she is producing honey, she needs people to work with her to produce that product, so that creates employment in her village. So
और आप इससे पहले आपका ज़रा बिजनेस का एक्सपीरियंस ज़रा बताइएगा, कैसे आपने हनी किया था उसके बाद। I said, can you give us a description of your journey as a business person? You started with honey and then what did you do?
मैंने 2014 में बिजनेस स्टार्ट किया और मेरे जैसे मुझे समझ में आता था, मतलब मैं जितना बिजनेस में कर सकती थी उतना कर रही थी, लेकिन मुझे बहुत ज़्यादा कुछ समझ में नहीं आता टेक्नोलॉजी के बारे में, फिर बिजनेस में आगे कैसे ग्रो करना है, मतलब दुनिया में क्या चलता है वो मुझे पता ही नहीं था। तब ट्रांसलेट कर।
So she's saying that when she started the business in 2014, she didn't know much about the techniques required for honey making or the business processes like marketing or handling human resources. So she was not aware much about it. And sorry, so what was the cutting edge in technology? So that's the part she was.
तब भी मैं बहुत कंफ्यूज थी, तब भी मेरे लाइफ में धर्मा लाइफ की एंट्री हो गई। जैसे मेरे लाइफ का टर्निंग पॉइंट मुझे मिल गया जब भी मैंने धर्मा लाइफ के साथ इंटरनेट साथी का प्रोग्राम फर्स्ट उनके साथ मैंने किया था।
So she's saying that so as I said before, when she started 2014, she didn't have much skills, but when she joined Dharma Life in 2016, that was the turning point where she learned a lot of things when associating with Dharma Life, and Internet Sathi was the first project which she did with Dharma Life.
तब मैंने गांव की 1004 महिलाओं को इंटरनेट सिखाया था। तब भी मैंने भी खुद पहली बार मोबाइल ऑपरेट किया था और उसमें मुझे भी बहुत सारे कन्फ्यूजन था कि मोबाइल से क्या करते हैं क्या नहीं, वो पता नहीं था। तो मैंने खुद भी सीखा और मेरी गांव की महिलाओं को भी सिखाया।
As part of the project, she helped around 1,000 women from her village to learn how to operate the mobile phone, use internet, how to access information on the mobile phone. And it was also a new thing for her. So she herself learned first and then taught to around 1,000 women in her village.
And just by way of context, I'm also delighted that Lucy Davis from Google, until recently at Google, is here because this initiative, Internet Sathi, trained how many millions of?
We trained 5.5 million.
Yeah, Dharma Life alone trained 5.5 million women in rural India to use mobile phones and smartphones. So this is Google and Tata Trust coming together. And it was, importantly, not CSR, it was google.com, not google.org, right? And so it was core, which is a theme we're hearing here, to the business rather than, and creating a next generation of customers and users rather than, doing good in the sort of charity sense of the term. Sorry, बताइए.
और फिर मैंने इंटरनेट पे देखा कि मुझे हनी बी में आगे कैसे बढ़ना है, जैसे कि कौन सी बीज होती है, फिर उनके जो भी रोग राई वगैरह उनको जो आती है तो कैसे सॉर्ट आउट करने का है, फिर हम बी बॉक्स की केयर कैसे कर सकते। क्योंकि मैंने जब हनी बी का बिज़नेस स्टार्ट किया था तो मेरे आजू बाजू के पड़ोस में गांव में किसी ने नहीं किया था और मैं तो महाराष्ट्र की फर्स्ट लेडी हूँ कि खुद बी कीपिंग कर रही हूँ। अभी किसी को करना है तो मैं उनको गाइडलाइन दे सकती हूँ, लेकिन मुझे वहाँ गाइडलाइन करने के लिए कोई नहीं था, तो फिर मैंने इंटरनेट का यूज़ किया।
Yeah, so before joining this Internet Sathi program, she didn't have access to information, but now because she knew how to operate the mobile phone, she was able to access information, what kind of bees you need to procure if you want to produce honey, what kind of techniques you need to use. And she's also referring that in 2016, when she started, there were very few people who were doing honey making business around near her village. So
She was the first.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she was the first one to do it.
Sorry.
Sorry, my link broke. So she was the first one, and then she started building up from there. And now she's a master trainer. So now she trains other women to start their honey making business.
फिर मैंने प्रोडक्शन तो कर लिया, लेकिन मुझे उसका मार्केटिंग पैकेजिंग उसके बारे में कुछ भी आइडिया नहीं था। तो सपोर्ट बाय धर्मा लाइफ ऑल टीम, स्टिकर, पैकेजिंग, वो मुझे गाइडलाइन करते गए और फिर मैं मेरे बिजनेस में आगे आगे बढ़ती गई।
So Dharma Life helped her with other business processes like marketing, packaging, and that's how she built her business.
आपने बताया कि employment भी हुआ, कैसे हुआ बताइए? I said, you mentioned that there's employment involved in selling products and services as well. Besides herself, how else did that happen? आपके अलावा कैसा employment हुआ? Jobs कैसे हुए? आपके कारण आपने जो किया ना, इसके कारण और महिलाओं को जॉब्स हुआ?
मैं जो हनी का प्रोडक्शन करती हूँ वो उनको मैं सेल करने के लिए देती हूँ, तो उनको वो जॉब मिला। फिर मेरे गांव में मतलब बी कैप्चरिंग का जो पार्ट रहता है कि गांव में किधर भी मधुमक्खियों का छत्ता होता है, वो लोग मुझे बताते हैं, तो मैं उनको पैसे पे करती हूँ, तो वहाँ के जो लोग हैं वो मुझे वो छत्ते ढूंढ के बताते हैं।
So she, as I said, she keeps training all the women, and she teaches how, so in honey making, you need to create the hives using boxes. So other women help her in that, creating that structure and hives. And that's how people get paid for that.
Thank you. हम फिर वापस आएंगे आपको, पहले उनसे पूछ के फिर वापस आएंगे. I said we'll come back to her and we'll turn over to Luke. Bahut dhanyawad. Thank you. Luke, over to you.
Hey, well, really good to be here. So I will answer the question from a couple of angles.
Please.
I will talk about products and services from a sum-up perspective, and then maybe I'll talk about some other from a personal perspective. So at sum-up, products and services, I'm going to try and use an analogy that maybe the people in the room would understand. So we wanted to bring card acceptance, the ability to take card payments, to a wider audience. We see that as any really small business owner, and that could be to the smallest of the small. If we think about it from a UK perspective, that's quite a mature market. 12 years ago when we were founded, I use the example of I buy a Christmas tree every year and the person comes round with a sum-up card machine and I pay them by card. 12 years ago, it would have been practically impossible for that person to accept card because the only options were to take an expensive contract with a bank, which would have had a monthly fixed fee, and would have been for a minimum term of perhaps 3 years or even 5 years. So if you're selling Christmas trees for 2 to 4 weeks a year, like all those fees made it unsustainable for you you'd have too much of a fixed overhead. So what SumUp did was we'd had no monthly fees, a simple pricing structure, so you could just pay as you go. And it's that sort of model. So if you think that enabled hundreds of thousands of businesses in the UK to take card acceptance that previously hadn't. So I think for products and services, if we think about that in less mature markets and how the long tail was scaled down, I think that's really, really important from us as a responsible corporate citizen. I'd also like to talk more from like a personal perspective, or not even so much a personal perspective, but maybe from my education about taxation and its importance in CSR and perhaps the balance between the two. And it's super interesting to hear that India enforces this with this 2% levy, and that seems like a really nice policy. So I studied economics in the late 90s, and at that time, Gordon Brown had said that it was the end of boom and bust. It was peak neoliberalism. There hadn't been the first tech crash. I think it was just on its way out. So it was quite a different time, and I imagine that education has moved on a little bit from then. But one thing that I was always drawn to was like taxation or levies. And if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I would have been of the belief that sort of tax could solve everything. Like a corporate, if you charge the appropriate tariff or tax, you could almost enforce corporate responsibility. So why I like that is because I was someone very much from the working classes, and the tax revenues that were collected in the UK enabled me to get a degree, which I might not be able to do today, given the same environment. So I have this belief that you can, if you take the utopian view that you believe a government would deploy taxes correctly, that taxation can enforce corporate social responsibility. However, in 20 years, maybe my thoughts have evolved. One of those reasons is that thinking back then, this taxation, it potentially enables corporations to be not a very good citizen, providing they're happy to pay the tariff. And I think about perhaps environmental impacts where a company could, I don't know, like dump oil in the sea or waste, but pay a taxation and almost like forget the fact that it's unethical. So I think now you come to a point where I believe that you sort of mix the two, which I think was the top, which is just being a good corporate citizen and some sort of taxation. So as a company like SumUp, we pay our appropriate taxes in countries, but we can also make the decision to support initiatives like the Wheeler Institute, so we can take stock of what we believe as a company and our beliefs and our values and those of our staff, and we can identify organisations that we'd like to support, like this one. So you can have a balance of having government or to deploy your taxes, hopefully appropriately, but also be able to take initiatives that you believe in as a business. So that's sort of the balance I'd come from.
I know that your colleague Felicitas will touch upon some of this
Yes,
on
absolutely.
the second panel. But can you just remind us, you have a voluntary policy in the company about your contributions.
Yes, so we support the 1%, is it 1% for the environment? For the planet, sorry, I see. Yeah, so I see it so often. I should have known that.
You just create the money.
Yeah, yeah.
1%.
But so you got the 1%. So 1% of our net revenues to support initiatives for the planet, and then we have separate initiatives that would be like this that we draw upon. Some would be local, some would be more international, and SumUp as an organisation is in more than 22 countries. So we've got a European base, we've got Latin America. We're moving out into Australia, and so we support global initiatives really that are close to our heart.
1% of annual revenues, not pre-tax profits like in India.
It's like so if listen.
1% from net revenue from the solar device.
Yeah, that's it. 1% net revenue for solar. There's the exact.
The money I spend it.
So basically, and if you think the Solo device is our most modern payment device, which is now becoming the standard. So all of the readers we sell now are Solo devices. So 1% of the net revenue that comes from those devices, straight into these initiatives.
Thank you, thank you. Wonderful. So you have a glimpse of the work that these terrific individuals and their organizations do. I wanted to quickly switch, before we go to questions, to the challenges of doing this kind of work. Because everything we've heard seems so intuitive, so reasonable, so important, and yet, in many ways, you represent exceptions. Too often, the role of business is seen as, the dark side of business, Forget about contributing taxes in the appropriate jurisdiction. You pay crazy money to someone in, some jurisdiction to save on taxes and say that's the way my shareholders will decide how best to allocate their earnings that will come from the Cayman Islands or something. So what are the challenges in a competitive market, or what are the challenges in reality in an organization, whether a tech startup or whether in a family business or as an entrepreneur, that you've faced in trying to address this imperative for business to do good? I'm going to start actually with Luke, you, since you were on a roll here, and then come in this.
Okay, so I think the challenges are conflicting priorities, and as much as you'd want to be the perfect corporate citizen, you do have an obligation to essentially, as a business, to be profitable and sustainable, not only for yourself and your shareholders, but for your employees, because they're relying on you. So to give an example, perhaps in the SumUp world, and to go back to my Christmas tree seller, like this is the utopian view of what we want to deliver at SumUp. But an individual who transacts for 2 to 4 weeks a year is not that economically viable to support an entire global platform. So you have a mix of customers. So you have a lot of hospitality businesses that transact daily and more frequently. And then the challenge is to ensure that your products and services are fit for that purpose, but also for your initial goal, which can, for instance, in areas such as customer support, you can have conflicting priorities between your vision and your mission, and actually making it economically viable. So there's a little bit of a push and pull, and individuals within a company may want to push because they support a larger customer rather than the support.
Because we do teach customer lifetime value and
things
like that in business school, and we do sometimes say, go for the high lifetime value customers, however defined, but your point is that those priorities need to be worked out.
Yeah, and I think you can absolutely find a balance. If you secure a strong enough LTV over CAC for your key, then you can support these merchants that perhaps will not make you money over their lifetime, but ultimately they deliver on the mission that you want as a business. Yeah. And I think there is some benefit in business to keep that mission always in focus, because ultimately that becomes part of your brand. And I don't think it'd be too cynical to say that always being strong to your brand ethos is important for your overall business and how you're presented in the market. So it's not all, it does all sort of feed this cycle of an effective business to even support your mission when it's perhaps not economic to do so.
I'll turn over to Muthu, but I will note, fortunately, Rohini, for whom English is her third language, her mother tongue is Marathi, she understands Hindi and can speak in Hindi, but English, थोड़ा बहुत आपको इंग्लिश तो समझ में आता है ना, so she can understand. So that's why originally she was meant to have headphones that didn't work, so we didn't want to keep you waiting. Instead, fortunately she understands. So मैं आपको थोड़ा translate करूँगा. पहले उनसे पूछता हूँ कि क्या problems उन्होंने face किया. So Muthu, over to you.
So I'd echo Luke's sentiments. I think there are various challenges of an operating nature, but I'll say with the food business, which is I guess the second business build out that we're doing, the packaged consumer goods business.
Can you give us an example? What exactly? I saw some pictures of very attractive.
Sure. So given we're in the business of sugar, we consumerized it. We saw an opportunity there to brand the sweetener segment, and I think we've subsequently enhanced that into branding a larger food segment. So it's not just sweeteners now. It's millets, it's dal, rice, and expanding into a broader array of products. We believe there's an opportunity in the food space wherein we can brand the unbranded. A lot of these segments are only sub 20% branded in India. And I think we're focused really on building the brand, but leveraging the brand equity and building distribution. But I think as we expanded into the food segment, apart from the operating challenges, I think there were also challenges of a corporate level that we faced. I mean, it is it's part of a conglomerate. You're entering a new business where there's behemoths, Indian behemoths and global behemoths who play in this segment. So there's always that, that doubt or that apprehension as can we take this path on? It's been a reasonable 5 years, but I mean, long way to go. I mean, I can remember a member of the board, an executive member of the board, actually turned up at one of our plant locations 5 years ago, and he said, I had asked for the packaging machine to be shut down. Why is it not shut down? I'm glad they didn't shut the machine down. I think it's packing. It's running 3 shifts now and packing a lot of products. But there is that sort of corporate apprehension in making a transition, in entering a new line of business or new segment of business. So that is kind of one.
And just so I understand, in that example, there's a business choice, and there's always apprehension around doing something new. And are you also suggesting that this foray into packaged foods was part of the doing good through products and services initiative, and therefore it's an innovation that people are apprehensive of? Can you link that back to the doing good point?
So I think what we were trying to do is obviously create a mode for ourselves to take us away from regulation and climate change. So I think that was what was central to why we took on this transition. And of course, by making clean, safe products available to consumers, especially in segments which is largely unbranded, we're bringing good quality product to the consumer. So I think that's one way in which we're doing good. We have a big focus on vertical integration. We've invested in sugar reducing technologies, Israeli startups, to actually bring that innovation to bear when we take product to the consumer. So I think that's kind of one avenue. The other avenue is around biofuel, and I think there it's really a challenge of regulation. And we talked about regulation. We'd really hope that there's going to be a sound policy framework around biofuel. We've seen some elements of that, but there's still a lot of dilly-dallying which the authorities do. For example, in India, there is a big voice which is very pro EV. Of course, there's a lot happening in the EV world in the recent time, and there's also a big voice, not as loud, which is more pro biofuel. So we're really trying to see, okay, how are both these sort of kinds of mobility going to coexist? And we're really hoping for a sound policy framework, which I think will take a little bit more time to evolve. So I think segments like these do have the policy overhang, and I think that regulation and building a business model around that continues to remain a challenge. Last point I'll make is with biofuel and food, I think I've talked about the farm and the farmer. That's where that's the common synergy point. And I think farm outcomes in India have to improve drastically. If you have a country in ascent, which is sort of doubling its GDP in the next 5 years, and is looking to agriculture for both food and fuel, you really need farms and farmers to deliver much better outcomes. R&D farms that we own, deliver 3 times the yield as the contracted farmlands that we're sort of locked in with.
Wow.
And I think those outcomes have to come. And corporate farming isn't possible in India. Goes back to regulation. It was tried. I think we failed. But I think farm outcomes have to improve significantly. And I think that needs multiple interventions around technology, efficiency, less indiscriminate use of water, so on and so forth.
So also operating under constraints, yeah. Thank you. रोहिणी जी, so प्रॉब्लम कैसे होते हैं, आपने सॉल्व कैसे किया?
पहले तो मेरा मधुमक्खियों का बिजनेस है, तो गांव के सब लोग गाय भैंस ये सब पालते हैं, तो मधुमक्खियाँ मैं पालूंगी तो मधुमक्खियाँ कोई पालता है क्या, ऐसे बोलकर वो तो मुझे पहले पागल ही समझते थे.
So she's referring to that in her village, the norm is households normally have cows, buffaloes, and they then sell that milk. But she's telling she started with honeybees, so that's kind of against the norm in the village. So her feeling was that households in her village might think that she's mad, that she's working with honeybees, which normally bite you.
तो फिर मैंने इसका हाल ऐसे निकाला कि ध्यान ही नहीं दिया, बोला कि करके दिखाएंगे खुद के मन को.
So she ignored all the voices which were coming from the villages, concentrated on working on her project, her business, and that's how she overcome this challenge of working against the norm.
फिर दूसरा था कि फाइनेंशियल प्रॉब्लम, क्योंकि मेरे पास बैंक तो मुझे लोन देने वाला नहीं था, क्योंकि गिरवी रखने के लिए मेरे पास कुछ भी नहीं था.
So her second problem was financial help. So in no way bank was going to give her business loan to start her business.
और
And she didn't have anything to.
And so the reason was she didn't have any mortgage to keep like a house collateral.
और फिर घर वाले भी गांव के लोगों के तरह ही मुझे समझ रहे थे, तो मैंने समझा कि उनको भी फाइनेंशियल सपोर्ट मांगना ठीक नहीं है.
And since villagers were already against what she was doing, so there was no chance villagers would help her with the financial help.
तो फिर मैंने थोड़ा दिमाग लगाया और मेरे गांव की जो महिलाएं मेरे साथ उन्होंने भी ट्रेनिंग लिया था, तो उनका ग्रुप बना के मैंने हर महिलाओं को मतलब कन्विंस किया कि मेरे जो मैं बिजनेस कर रही हूँ उसमें शेयर होल्डर बन जाओ, तो 5,000 रुपीज़ उनको कन्विंस करके मैंने ले लिए.
So the solution she found out was she convinced some women from her village that you invest 5,000 rupees, so that's around 50 pounds, in my business and become a shareholder in my business. So you will get some profits, and that's how she collected the initial seed fund to start her business.
और फिर और थोड़े पैसे लग रहे थे, तो मैंने बचत गट से लोन लिया और खुद का गोल्ड गिरवी रख के मैंने बिजनेस का स्टार्टअप किया.
And for the additional funds, she got funds from the self-help group, which was operating in the village. And she also used her gold as a collateral to get some gold loan also. And that's how she got the financial thing sorted.
ये सब करके मैंने बिजनेस स्टार्ट किया, प्रोडक्शन निकालना चालू कर दिया. लेकिन फिर एक बड़ी दिक्कत आ गई कि जो प्रोडक्शन मैंने किया है वो मार्केटिंग और सेलिंग का.
Yeah, so now she had the funds, she started production, she made honey, but now the next challenge was how do you sell it? How do you market this product?
तो फिर धर्मा लाइफ की एंट्री मेरे लाइफ में हो गई.
So this is how she connected with Dharma Life, and Dharma Life helped her with these processes.
तो फिर मैंने फेसबुक पे व्हाट्सएप पे मार्केटिंग करना चालू कर दिया.
So she started doing social media marketing using Facebook and WhatsApp.
ऐसे जो भी मेरे बिजनेस में दिक्कतें आने लगी थी, तो मैं उसको ऐसे सोच समझ के सुलझाव करके यहाँ तक आई हूँ.
So to sum up, every challenge which keeps on coming in her business, she tries to find an innovative solution and get over it and try to ensure that her business keeps growing.
और मैं मेरे बिजनेस के बारे में यही सोचती आई हूँ कि मैं जो बिजनेस करूँगी वो मेरे पर्यावरण के लिए अच्छा होना चाहिए और मैं सबकी मदद भी कर सकूँ, तो मैंने वैसा ही बिजनेस चॉइस किया है. जैसे कि पर्यावरण अच्छा रहता है क्योंकि बीज हम सेव करते हैं तो हम पूरे जग को बचा सकते हैं। फिर मैंने ईवी कार लिया, वो भी क्योंकि पोल्यूशन ना हो। फिर मेरे बिजनेस में जो भी मुझे पैसे मिलते हैं उसमें से मैं थोड़े बहुत पैसे मेरे गांव के बच्चों के लिए, उनके एजुकेशन के लिए खर्च कर रही हूँ। क्योंकि जो पहले क्वेश्चन बताया था ना आपने कि उनमें से जो भी आता है तो हम खुद कमाएंगे तो लोगों को दे पाएंगे, और हम कुछ बिजनेस करेंगे तो लोगों को जॉब भी ऑफर कर सकते हैं, और लोगों की हेल्प करना भी एक मानव धर्म के लिए बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है।
Okay. So what she was saying, that as part of her business, she is a lot environment conscious. So one of the reasons she started a bee business was that bees are very important for biodiversity. They play an important role. So that's an important contribution she wants to make via her business. At the same time, through her personal habits, personal consumption, for example, as she said, instead of buying a petrol car, she has bought an electric vehicle car.
Or an
in
ethanol car. Apparently she's in the EV category, yeah.
an electric vehicle car, because she says that it's important we also take care of our environment which we live in. At the same time, she says that as part of her revenue, she keeps aside some funds and gives it to children in her village for their education or any activity, any support they need. So that's how, using business, she wants to help people around her.
Thank you very much. We have time for a few questions. If you could raise your hand and introduce yourself and ask the question, my colleague Mariam, on behalf of the Zoom group. Yes.
Hi, I'm Mariam from The Wheeler. I'm just going to ask a question from Zoom, which we have so many attendees on. So someone's asked, how does one balance the dual objectives of doing good whilst yet providing a healthy good for your range of products in the food space? So how does one balance doing good, balance the dual objective of doing good whilst providing products, I guess is the question.
So yeah, I'll take. So in the food space, so the one is what I was referring to, Professor Chandy, is providing products which are of good quality, which are safe, which are manufactured and packed well, especially in segments which are unbranded. But then obviously where a
And that's a huge deal. I don't know if people appreciate that. Yeah, to walk into a place, health and hygiene.
And especially as India is, India has a certain retail landscape, so on and so forth, to provide this. And also, if you take a segment like sweetener, I mean, there's a lot which is written about, refined sugar, for example, and its the negative effects. So what we've done is obviously that it is a basic product that we provide, but also jaggery, low glycemic index sugars. We're just launching a low-cal sugar. We're providing consumers with a suite of products so that they can make choices based on brown sugar, based on what their sort of health requirements are, so on and so forth. So I think that's the power that, say, a branded consumer business with, say, an expertise on the sweetener segment could do for consumers, because everyone would have a different set of products that they could choose from. Similarly, investing in some of these Israeli technologies, which are working on sugar reduction, so on and so forth, ultimately will translate towards giving consumers a choice, which then they can, as health consciousness is increasing, they can sort of translate into their sort of daily choices that they make.
And Muthu, is that part of the conversations you have at the senior management level? Is this sort of the doing good element, or is it just because you're in such a crucially important category, food, it's sort of natural? Can you walk us through the decision?
No, we certainly have these conversations. I don't think we would have gone out and participated in these investment rounds if we didn't have those management or board level conversations. The entry into jaggery, for example, a natural Indian sweetener, it's there in all of our homes, but we started converting parts of our core sugar factories into actually jaggery modules. Jaggery actually is a product which comes from the feedstock comes from cleaner sugarcane fields, which use less harmful chemical agri inputs. The processing costs of jaggery are much lower because you don't use as much energy, And jaggery is a product which is, again, more healthier for you as a sweetener as opposed to refined sugar. So multiple, at the farm level, at the processing level, from an energy perspective, and for a consumer, there are many, many avenues of positive impact which just one product can make.
Wow.
And I think that's the power of, say, again, a packaged consumer goods company to reach this far and wide.
With a traditional product, you didn't invent jaggery, right? And it's that innovation around it.
An interesting point that you make, we actually have to spend less marketing dollars marketing jaggery because it is well known, so it markets itself. So the money can actually, the resource can actually be allocated to the farm, to the process, and to the distribution, to make this widely available. Otherwise, you'd be spending, it's the operational challenge. You'd be spending more marketing dollars doing advertising, and you'd have less to sort of invest on the rest of the value chain. But this is a wonderful example where you can invest on the rest of the value chain, which has positive impact for multiple stakeholders.
And the product sells itself. Yeah. Wonderful. Yes, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us the question.
Toby Velke, Sloan Fellow. And my question is around economic development in India. If we are to believe our LBS professors that up to 60%, up to 60% of the workforce is in agriculture, as low as 20% of women are employed, and really to build a middle class and to pull the GDP up, as China has done recently, the population needs to move from agriculture to manufacturing, and more women need to enter the workforce. So the question is, how do you incent this change? And Rohini had talked a little bit about creating enterprise for women in a village, which is a great example. I was just wondering if there's other examples of moving into manufacturing that are to create that more attractive role for agricultural people and more women in the workforce.
Yeah, we heard from Rohini, but both of you represent businesses where women play as business owners or engage, play an important role. Now, the numbers on agriculture are going down in India. It was 60%, now it's close to less than 50%, but nevertheless large. And the women's, perfect segue to the next panel as well, women's workforce employment. I mean, they're busy doing other things, but paid employment. Muthu, your part of India is seen by some as a success story of engaging women in manufacturing, both success story in manufacturing as well as engaging women in manufacturing. Can you maybe start with that, and we can go through
Sure. So I think you're alluding to if you disaggregate, and I think data you're seeing from southern India, the 4 southern states certainly talks to this point. But yes, I think India has to. I think there's also the services sector, which has really been the core of India. But that's obviously an export-led sector. But I think one of the things which has happened, as India, as we know, is in ascent, it will, very likely be the 3rd largest economy by the GDP-wise by the end of the decade. A couple of things have happened from an India perspective. I think the whole digital revolution, especially with UPI and the India stack, that is very rapidly scaled over the last few years. Very ably supported by the authorities, and I think that's enabled so many businesses to come in and position themselves on that digital stack. Connectivity now is across the country. There's more than 1 billion people who are connected to sort of bandwidth in the mobile ecosystem. Manufacturing is very, very critical to the next phase of growth, and certainly women also coming into the workforce. And I think companies are very, very conscious of that. It's being encouraged in a very, very big way. I mean, our larger corporate group has just entered the semiconductor space. We've also acquired a company which is into the design of semiconductor chips, because I think there's a lot of corporate India which is starting to believe that India needs to innovate. There needs to be knowledge-based innovation, design of these. I mean, this chip company, all of the designers are Indian, but they're on, I think they're based in the US. So I think that corporate India is very, very cognizant of that going forward, and I think it is being very ably supported by the government authorities. You're seeing, and we're hoping for more of this on the biofuel side, but you're seeing in a lot of sectors, government and business working very closely with each other.
And on the gender front?
So on the gender front as well, I think a lot of impetus towards having more diversity and inclusion across the workforce. You're going to see more and more of that. I think the fact that in the southern states, especially the fact that there's more women employed, that's starting to reflect in the economic progress of the region as well.
So it could be an example.
Absolutely.
And Luke, the Christmas tree example, you mentioned we do the same thing with Christmas tree, and there's a lady there, and I remember talking to her, and she says, it gives me flexibility, this job. Would you relate to the point, not just to India, but to...
I think I'll try and broaden it out because I can't
Yeah.
claim to be an expert on India.
Yeah.
And I think you've had
Yeah,
some great answers. But I think from our point of supporting these initiatives, which we can do as a good corporate citizen, but I think how we can present ourselves as a business in some of the more mature markets and the largest global economies is making an effort to have diverse senior management teams, and I think that's part of the challenge is to ensure that females are represented in our leadership team, and we do a pretty good job at that. And also, I'm sure you would say we can always improve, but also we
Felicitas is the head of
diversity,
yes,
yes. But also what the things that we do at SumUp as well. We're a technology company and products, and we have a lot of software that we design, and there has always been a challenge to have female representation in, for instance, in development and coding. And so we do a lot of outreach programs to support females entering in the workforce and feeling comfortable in a tech environment. So we do a lot of work there, and we can hopefully show ourselves as being a good
and an example.
Reflect an example, I suppose, is the best we can do.
Time flies, and
Yeah,
I realize
absolutely.
we're at it at the end. There are two things I wanted to mention before we end. One is just the common themes I saw in each of your such different contexts and yet such similar themes. One being that this stuff is core. Business for good is core to strategy. The second I saw is that it's not as much as a personality or a moral transformation as an innovation transformation. Some of the actions, if it's core, represents a deviation from the norm. And therefore, all of the challenges associated with business for good in many ways link to innovation, and that's core as well. And finally, I took away the deeply personal nature, in each of your stories, both of those you engage with as well as your own individual story. I was struck by the deeply personal nature. And so we're not a corporation, we are decision makers, we are groups of decision makers, and we have a role. We're not helpless. So thank you as individuals for making a difference. Speaking of making a difference, I will note our Women in Business Club, our India Club, and our Social Impact Club who've come together to bring us all together. So thank you, the members of the Women in Business, India Club, and Social Impact Club for your support. And I'll end with our wonderful translator who has a day job. Mithilesh is a PhD student in our at London Business School in the third year who does all kinds of other things. But today, and I'm his PhD supervisor, as you could probably tell, I was trying to not quite that. Sorry about that, Mithilesh. You know how much I love you and respect you. Thank you very much.